Welcome to Unearthly. This episode is about ghosts and hauntings. I grew up in a small California desert town called Joshua Tree, home of the Joshua Tree National Park. I was in my early 20s at the time and the only one with a car. Growing up in a small desert town leaves you with limited options for fun, so we'd make use of the park. Occasionally, a group of us would pile into the station wagon with beer and smokes and drive through the park late at night. Endless stretches of dark roads drenched in silence, except for a loud bunch of guys zipping around in a blue Mercury. Hours would go by as we drove the long, desolate moonlit roads and stop only at rocks we liked to climb. I cannot understate how isolated the place was, how alone. No buildings, no other cars, not even a single light for thousands and thousands of acres. This trip started like any other, except there were more of us than usual. Crammed into the car, windows down, I chain smoked and drove a good 20 miles over the speed limit, and we were all having a blast. Up ahead in the distance, we saw a blue light. It was miles away. I told my friends there must be some road work going on there. Sometime later, we arrived at one of our favorite stops and climbed the rocks for a good 45 minutes. We drank some beer and had fun. We got back into the car and kept driving. The road was leading us towards the blue light. I wondered why a road sign would have a blue light. Something about the light felt off. Was it a UFO? But it hadn't moved an inch the entire time we were in the desert. As we approached the light, I slowed down to get a better look. It wasn't a UFO. It wasn't a roadwork sign or a car. On the side of the road, facing us, unmoving for over an hour at this point, was a man. An old white man just standing there with a scruffy beard in smudgy miner clothes and a mining helmet. His helmet light giving off an ethereal blue light. His face blank but gaze piercing us. As we drove by, he finally turned to keep pace with us, his light visible, unmoving once again, staring at us as we left. I checked the time. It was 1 a.m. We didn't see a single vehicle, not even a horse, or any way for this old miner to get this far and deep into the park, nor any reason for him to be there at that unearthly hour. Worst of all, we estimated he'd been standing there, facing us, for at least an hour, motionless until we got there. Not once did that light flicker to indicate that he looked down for a moment or turn his head. He just stood there staring down a road at a car full of dumbasses. We never saw him again despite our many trips to the park. But a couple of years ago, I asked around if anyone else had seen him. I found just one story of a couple that saw him near where we did. Ditto, standing there late at night, staring. In hindsight, I do wish we'd stopped that night when we'd seen him, because that's the only way I know for sure if it really was the ghost of an old dead miner.
When I was 7, we moved to a 3-story house. The top floor had only one bedroom, and it was right above my bedroom. I'd sometimes take my toys upstairs to play, but from the very first time I entered that room, I got the chills. I always felt someone watching me. I would ignore these creepy feelings until it became too uncomfortable and leave that room. Soon, I stopped going there unless I had friends over. I'd go to sleep with my favorite teddy bear tucked in my arms, and sometimes I'd wake up to find it propped up in a corner of my room, sitting upright, facing me. I was too young to understand paranormal events, so I thought my parents were putting it there while waking me up for school. But this started happening so frequently that one night I was too scared to bring it to my bed. I put it on my chair and went to sleep. I woke up to find the bear in the corner. Not to be outdone, I put the bear in my closet that night, making sure to shut the closet door. The next morning, the bear was back in the corner, propped up, staring at me. No matter where I put it, it would end up in the corner every morning. One day, I finally got rid of the teddy bear. Maybe that's what triggered the events that took place late that very night. I woke up to a loud noise like something heavy falling on the floor. It was pitch dark, but I could make out the outline of a small creature in my room with pointy ears and claws. I couldn't see much else except intense darkness. I was too scared to either move or even yell for my mom. The creature turned its head towards me and disappeared, only to reappear in another corner of the room. This time, it was clutching my backpack. It was only about slightly larger than my backpack. In a flash, it vanished and then appeared next to my bed. On the side of my bed was a computer table. The computer was attached to an extension cord that had a glowing red light. With a flash, the creature vanished again, but the red light on the extension cord began blinking non-stop. Since I couldn't see the creature anymore, I was sure it was under my bed and was going to come out from the other side. I covered my head with a blanket and lay paralyzed with fear for hours until I fell asleep from exhaustion. In the morning, I brushed it off as a bad dream, though it had felt so real. Anyway, I was too eager to play games on my computer, just like I did every Sunday morning. But the computer just wouldn't start and made weird staticky sounds whenever I tried to start it. Eventually, my uncle was called. He fixes computers for a living and came to inspect it, only to find that my computer was damaged. It was beyond repair and had to be thrown out. It had worked perfectly well before this incident. After that, I moved all of my stuffed toys into the room next to mine. In my room, all the scary activity stopped, and I never sensed anything creepy unless I went to the room upstairs.
When I was 9, I visited America's oldest fort, Castillo de San Marcos, built in the late 1600s. Its violent history included sieges, tortures, massacres, and even a tragic love story that resulted in its haunting. The story of forbidden love began when the commander of the fort, Colonel Garcia, married a much younger woman. Months later, his beautiful but bored wife, Dolores, was smitten by the commander's handsome young assistant, Captain Abella. The two fell in love and began to meet in secret, and many months passed by blissfully. But one day, the colonel got a whiff of the affair when he detected his wife's perfume emanating from the captain's uniform. He'd already had his suspicions, so this was the last straw. Right away, the star-crossed young lovers were seized and then thrown into the dungeon, a small, windowless room deep inside the fort. They were chained alive to the dungeon wall, and to prevent escape, the only entrance to the dungeon was sealed. When quizzed on their whereabouts, the commander said that he'd sent Captain Abella away on an assignment overseas. As for Dolores, he said, she'd taken ill and returned to Spain. No one dared to question him. As for the dungeon, it lay forgotten for almost half a century before it was rediscovered in 1833. By then, all that remained of the couple was their skeletons. Or so it said on the sign at the entrance to the dungeon. As my mom was reading it, I was crouching down and looking through the tiny arched entrance to the room. As I stood up, I felt a powerful burst of wind come shooting out of the room and go right through me. It was like it went in one side of my body and out the other. I ran out of there as fast as I could, pretty shaken up. A half hour later, I gathered my composure and went back to the dungeon with my mom and the tour group, and nothing scary happened. Years later, on Halloween, an episode of Ghost Adventures was coming up on TV. For those who are not aware, Ghost Adventures is a TV show where the intrepid hosts spend nights in haunted places while filming it. I wasn't interested in the show and was about to click away, but noticed that this episode was set in Castillo de San Marcos, so I watched. When they entered the dungeon, the host suddenly panicked in the middle of a sentence. He said, "Oh my god, I just felt like a gust of wind go right through me." My hair stood on its end. He was reliving the exact same experience that I had. To this day, I still get goosebumps while thinking about it. Thanks for listening and please subscribe.